United Nations, New York, September 27, 2025. At the United Nations General Assembly, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov delivered one of the most charged speeches of this year's session, accusing Israel of destabilizing the Middle East through what he described as unlawful military actions. Addressing world leaders gathered in New York, Lavrov warned that regional tensions had reached a critical point, blaming Israeli policies and the failure of the international community to curb them. His remarks, which drew immediate attention among delegates, underscored Moscow's intent to portray itself as a defender of international law against what it considers unilateral military aggression. Lavrov began by condemning what he called a pattern of Israeli operations that, in his view, disregards international norms. With the chamber's attention fixed on him, he declared, Sergei Lavrov said, "Today, Israel's illegal use of force against the Palestinians, its aggressive actions against Iran, Qatar, Yemen, Lebanon, Syria and Iraq threaten to blow up the entire Middle East." The statement was among the sharpest criticisms of Israel delivered on the UN floor in recent years and set the tone for the remainder of his address. Lavrov argued that the current trajectory of events in the region, marked by Israeli airstrikes, border clashes and escalating proxy confrontations, was unsustainable. He portrayed these developments not as isolated episodes, but as part of a pattern of behavior. In his words, these actions risk transforming local conflicts into a full-scale regional confrontation. While many in the assembly sat in silence, a few delegations were seen exchanging glances, a sign of the discomfort that his remarks caused among countries aligned with Israel or wary of Moscow's positioning. The Russian diplomat called on the international community to take a more active role in preventing further escalation. His appeal came as the region faced mounting volatility with cross-border drone strikes, insurgent activity, and rising humanitarian crises. According to Lavrov, the lack of accountability for Israel's military operations has emboldened it to expand its reach. He insisted that this impunity was undermining not only regional stability, but also the credibility of international law. Moscow's top diplomat framed Russia's stance as rooted in respect for the United Nations Charter and the sovereignty of states. Lavrov contended that unilateral military measures and occupation policies were at the heart of the instability plaguing the Middle East. He stressed that the international community should not tolerate actions that threaten the territorial integrity of sovereign nations. By spotlighting Israel's operations in countries such as Syria, Lebanon and Iraq, he positioned Russia as advocating for the rights of smaller states caught between larger powers' conflicts. Although his remarks reflected long-standing Russian criticism of Western-aligned states in the Middle East, they carried added significance in the current climate of strained relations between Moscow and Washington. Many diplomats noted that Lavrov's speech sought to link Israeli actions to broader patterns of Western-supported military interventions, thus reinforcing Russia's narrative of opposing what it sees as selective enforcement of international norms. Lavrov's speech drew a range of reactions in the hall. Delegates from countries traditionally sympathetic to the Palestinian cause appeared attentive and approving. By contrast, diplomats from several Western nations and US allies refrained from applauding and maintained neutral expressions, signaling their disagreement with his assertions. Observers noted that while Israel's delegation did not immediately respond from the floor, its representatives were seen conferring with colleagues during the speech. Officials from Arab and Gulf countries watched intently, reflecting their own concerns about the growing volatility in the region. For many analysts, the remarks underscored Russia's effort to appeal to the global south by criticizing what it views as double standards in international diplomacy, particularly regarding the enforcement of international law and responses to military occupations. Throughout his address, Lavrov emphasized that the international community could not ignore the cumulative effect of ongoing military campaigns in the region. He described a chain of conflicts, from the decades-long Palestinian struggle to more recent strikes in Syria, Iraq and Lebanon, as interconnected flashpoints that together risk igniting a broader conflagration. He warned that failure to act decisively could lead to the kind of regional breakdown that would be difficult, if not impossible, to contain. While acknowledging the complexities of the Middle East's political landscape, he argued that respect for sovereignty and adherence to UN resolutions were the only viable foundations for peace. Lavrov's remarks came amid heightened regional tensions. In recent weeks, cross-border drone incidents and retaliatory strikes between Israeli forces and militant groups operating in neighboring states had raised fears of a wider conflict. Humanitarian agencies have warned of worsening crises in areas already affected by years of war, particularly in Gaza, southern Lebanon and northern Yemen. Moscow has long criticized Israel's military strikes in Syria, where Russian forces have maintained a presence since 2015 in support of President Bashar al-Assad's government. These strikes, often aimed at Iran-backed militias and weapons transfers, have repeatedly targeted locations where Russian personnel are stationed, though rarely causing direct clashes. By including a range of countries, Iran, Qatar, Yemen, Lebanon, Syria and Iraq in his list, Lavrov sought to highlight the breadth of what he characterized as Israeli aggression and its potential to destabilize the entire region. Beyond condemning Israeli policies, Lavrov urged the UN to reassert its role as a mediator and guarantor of peace. He implied that without collective diplomatic engagement, local disputes could spiral into an uncontrollable regional war. The Russian minister advocated for renewed attention to long-standing UN resolutions on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, particularly those calling for a two-state solution and an end to settlement expansion in occupied territories. While his speech avoided direct proposals for new resolutions, his appeal for respecting sovereignty and ending the illegal use of force was clearly intended as a rebuke to those supporting unilateral military strategies. Analysts say Lavrov's intervention at the UN reflects not only Moscow's concerns about instability in the Middle East, but also its strategic interest in countering Western influence. By portraying Israel as a destabilizing actor and presenting Russia as a champion of lawful international relations, Moscow seeks to strengthen ties with Arab and non-aligned nations. His remarks also come at a time when Russia's own international standing has been under intense scrutiny due to its actions in Ukraine. By shifting focus to the Middle East, Lavrov aimed to present his country as a responsible power seeking to prevent further conflicts rather than fuel them. As he concluded his remarks, Lavrov cautioned that ignoring the dangers of unchecked military campaigns would have dire consequences not just for the region, but for global security. His tone, while measured, carried a sense of urgency. Sergei Lavrov reiterated, "Today, Israel's illegal use of force against the Palestinians, its aggressive actions against Iran, Qatar, Yemen, Lebanon, Syria and Iraq threaten to blow up the entire Middle East." The repetition of this line, almost word for word, reinforced the gravity he ascribed to the situation. It served as both a warning and a challenge to the international community to address what he considers a looming crisis. While his remarks resonated with some nations that have long criticized Israeli policies, they are unlikely to shift the positions of Western powers that continue to back Israel's security rationale for its military operations. The speech, however, highlighted the persistent divides within the UN on questions of sovereignty, occupation and the use of force. In the corridors after the session, delegates were heard debating not only the content of Lavrov's speech, but also its timing, delivered at a moment when conflicts across the region have taken on new dimensions due to advances in drone warfare and cyber operations. The coming weeks will show whether Lavrov's warning gains traction among member states or remains largely symbolic. For now, it adds another layer to the geopolitical contest playing out at the UN, where debates over the Middle East continue to expose rifts between major powers. Diplomats say that much will depend on whether the Security Council can find common ground to address the growing risks. Until then, Lavrov's words, delivered in a calm but deliberate tone, will echo as a reminder of the tensions simmering across the region.